My brother laughed that I was too soft to survive outside home. When he lost his job and came knocking, I handed him the same line he used on me. Toughen up. I couldn't sleep last night, just kept staring at the ceiling with that phrase bouncing around my skull. Toughen up. That's what my brother Jake, 32 male, used to say to me. I'm Mark, 29, male. And for as long as I can remember, Jake made it his mission to remind me I wasn't built for the real world. Jake was the kind of guy who carried himself like he was untouchable. Football in high school, frat boy in college, corporate sales after graduation. Every family gathering he'd hold court like some motivational speaker nobody asked for. He'd laugh at me for staying close to home, for working in IT support instead of chasing some high-stakes job. He called my apartment a cave, told me I was too soft, too cautious, too comfortable. What made it worse was that people believed him. My parents lit up when Jake bragged about closing a deal. When I mentioned fixing a network outage that kept an entire company running, Mom just smiled politely and asked if I'd thought about challenging myself more. It didn't matter how steady my life was, how much peace I'd built. In their eyes, Jake was the one living. I was just existing. The worst night was about 2 years ago. We were at a bar after Dad's birthday dinner. Jake had a few too many, and in front of half my cousins, he clapped me on the back and said, if we drop Mark in the middle of the city with no money, he'd curl up in a ball by morning. Guy's too soft for this world. Everyone laughed. I tried to laugh too, but it felt like something tearing inside my chest. I went home that night shaking. I wanted to scream at him, but instead I sat in silence, replaying every jab, every smirk, every time he made me feel small. It wasn't just teasing. He believed it. And deep down, I hated that part of me almost believed it too. But here's the thing. Soft doesn't mean weak. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I'd built it carefully, brick by brick. And while Jake was flying high, he had no safety net. He lived like the world owed him applause, no savings, no backup plan, just vibes and arrogance. So when he lost his job last spring and showed up at my door, eyes red, voice cracking, asking if he could crash with me, it felt like the universe was holding out a microphone. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging for space at the table. He was. And I knew exactly what I was going to say. When Jake showed up at my apartment that night, he didn't look like the brother I grew up with. His hair was greasy, shirt wrinkled, and the sharp arrogance he used to wear like cologne was gone, replaced with this twitchy restlessness, like he couldn't sit still inside his own skin. I opened the door, and he just stood there holding a duffel bag that looked half stuffed with clothes, half stuffed with shame. He didn't even try to fake it with a smile. Just, Mark, I need a place. Just for a bit. If you knew Jake, you'd understand why that moment nearly broke me. My whole life, he'd been the one calling me the weak link, the one too soft to make it. And now here he was, jobless, girlfriend gone, apartment lease terminated, begging me for a couch. I wanted to slam the door, but I didn't. I told him to come in. The first week was manageable. He slept on my couch, said he was figuring things out. He claimed he was applying for jobs, but every time I walked into the living room, he was playing Call of Duty or scrolling through his phone. He'd leave half-eaten takeout containers on the coffee table, socks balled in corners. I'd come home from work and my apartment smelled like old sweat and fried food. By week 2, the cracks were splitting wide open. He started making comments again, little echoes of the old Jake. Man, this place is tiny. Don't you ever get sick of it? Or, you really should think about doing something bigger with your career. I'd bite my tongue, but it was like he couldn't help himself. Even jobless, broke, and homeless, Jake still saw me as the underachiever. One night it boiled over. I came home late from a nightmare shift. Our servers had gone down at 4 a.m., and I'd been up since. I opened the door and found Jake sprawled on the couch, watching TV, beer bottles all over the floor. He looked up at me and said, "You're late. I was going to order pizza, but I figured you wouldn't mind covering it." Something in me snapped. I told him he needed to get his act together, that I wasn't his maid, his bank, or his fallback plan. He laughed. "You're seriously giving me a lecture? Come on, Mark. You wouldn't last a day in my shoes. Don't act like you're tougher than me." I remember my hands shaking. I wanted to scream that he was in my shoes now, under my roof, surviving because of the brother he said was too soft. But I didn't. I swallowed it. That night, I lay awake in my own bed while Jake snored on my couch, and I realized something. He wasn't going to change just because life knocked him down. If anything, he was angrier, more unstable, more likely to burn everything around him while pretending he was still in control. And I knew, if I didn't draw the line soon, he'd take me down with him. The breaking point came faster than I expected. It was a Friday night, and I'd just finished a brutal week at work. Server outages, back-to-back calls, the kind of week that leaves your brain buzzing like static. I opened my apartment door and immediately felt my stomach sink. Jake had thrown a party. Not a huge one, but enough. Two of his buddies from back in the day, sitting on my couch, empty beer cans rolling across the floor, my Bluetooth speaker blasting some awful rap playlist. My coffee table had a fresh burn mark from a cigarette someone stubbed out on it. I just stood there in the doorway, bag still slung over my shoulder, and said, "What the hell is this?" Jake looked up like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, then plastered on that old smirk. "Relax, man. We're just blowing off steam. Don't be so uptight." Something in me broke. "This is my apartment, Jake. You don't get to trash it and invite people over like it's yours. You're a guest. Act like one." He didn't like that. His face hardened, the smirk sliding into something uglier. He stood up, too close, too fast, and for the first time in my life, I realized Jake wasn't just mean. He was dangerous. "You think you're better than me now? Just because I'm between jobs? You'd be nothing out there, Mark. Nothing. You'd crumble in a week if the world didn't babysit you." His friends were watching, eyes darting between us. I told him it was time for them to leave. One of the guys shrugged and started gathering his stuff, but Jake, he wasn't finished. He grabbed my framed photo off the shelf, the one of me and Dad at my college graduation, and hurled it against the wall. Glass exploded across the carpet. I lost it. I shoved him back, and for a second it looked like he was going to swing at me. His fists were balled, jaw clenched. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely see. But instead of hitting me, he kicked my coffee table over, scattering cans and ash everywhere. "Fine," he shouted, his voice cracking in a way that almost sounded like a sob. "Maybe I don't need this place. Maybe I don't need you." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood in the wreckage of my own living room, shaking, glass crunching under my shoes. And the wildest part? My first thought wasn't anger, it was relief. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was quiet. But I knew Jake. Quiet never lasted long with him. And sure enough, the next morning, I woke to the sound of pounding on my door, and his voice, raw and hoarse, screaming my name. The pounding on my door at 7 a.m. was so violent I thought for a second it might splinter right off the hinges. I shot upright in bed, heart slamming. "Mark, open the damn door!" Jake's voice, rough and cracked, like he hadn't slept. I stumbled into the living room, glass from last night still scattered across the carpet, the coffee table on its side. I opened the door just enough to see him, and he looked worse than ever. Bloodshot eyes, shirt stained with something dark, a cut on his knuckle. "You left me out there," he barked, pushing at the door. "I needed help. You can't just shut me out like that. I'm your brother." I kept my hand on the chain lock. "Jake, you trashed my place. You broke my stuff. You need to go." That's when he lost it. He pounded both fists against the door so hard the chain rattled. Neighbors started peeking out of their doors, whispering, and Jake, being Jake, turned it into a spectacle. "Tell them, Mark. Tell everyone how you'd rather let your own brother rot than help him out. You think you're better than me? Look at you, hiding in there like a coward. You'll never survive without me." I felt every eye in the hallway on me. Humiliation crawled under my skin, but beneath it, something sharper was taking root. Anger. I finally slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, chest heaving. He kept pounding, kept shouting, until finally there was silence. I thought maybe he'd left. Then I heard it. The crunch of glass as he kicked over the trash can outside my door, the shriek of metal as he dragged it down the hallway. By the time I went out hours later, he was gone. But my front door was smeared with dirt, my hallway littered with overturned garbage. Neighbors avoided my eyes. Some gave me looks like I was the problem. That night, I got a text from Mom. Jake called. He says you threw him out. He's family, Mark. You need to help him. He's having a hard time. I just stared at it, my hands shaking. He hadn't told her about the broken frame, the screaming, the threats. No, in his version, I was the selfish little brother refusing to give him a hand. And like always, they bought it. I didn't answer her. But lying in bed that night, I realized something. Jake had no shame, no limit. If I didn't put a stop to this, he'd drag me down in front of everyone, family, neighbors, even my job. For years, he'd said I was too soft to survive. But now he was circling like a wounded animal, biting at anything that moved. And the sick truth was, he wasn't going to stop until I made him. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night the revenge began brewing. All right, here's the first update in the style of a Reddit follow-up. Wow. I didn't expect so many people to care about my story. Honestly, I posted it half out of frustration, half because I couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. And then my inbox blew up. First off, thank you to everyone who told me I wasn't crazy. Because for years, Jake convinced me I was soft, weak, ungrateful, whatever label he needed to slap on me so he could keep playing King of the Hill. Reading people call out his behavior for what it really is, abuse, manipulation, and straight-up bullying, it hit harder than I thought it would. I can't lie, some of the comments made me tear up. But then there were the wild ones. Some of y'all told me to burn his stuff on the lawn, others said to call the cops immediately. One guy DM'd me a full Home Alone blueprint for turning my apartment into a booby-trapped fortress. Tempting, not gonna lie. Here's what actually happened since I posted. Jake didn't just disappear after trashing my hallway. He doubled down. He's been calling me nonstop, leaving voicemails that swing between begging and threatening. One minute it's, "Bro, I need you. You're all I have." The next it's, "You think you can do this to me? I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." And he has been running his mouth. My mom called again, angrier this time. Said Jake told her I humiliated him in front of the neighbors, that I locked him out like a stray dog. She asked me how I could kick a man while he's down. I told her the truth, about the broken photo, the screaming, the mess. She sighed and said, "You know Jake's always been hot-tempered. He doesn't mean it." That sentence, it's the same thing they used to say when he shoved me around as a kid. He doesn't mean it. As if intent erases impact. So here's where I'm at. I've decided enough is enough. Jake wants to play games, smear me to family, drag me into public scenes. Fine. He thinks I'm too soft to fight back. Even better. Because I've been watching him spiral. He's sloppy now, reckless. And for the first time in my life, I realize I'm not the vulnerable one here. He is. I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say, I've got an idea. Something that will hit him where it hurts most. Not money, not fists, but his pride. The one thing he values above anything else. Soft, huh? Let's see how he handles what's coming next. I didn't have to chase Jake for an opportunity. He handed me the perfect setup himself. About a week after his meltdown in my hallway, Jake showed up again. Not at my door this time, thank God, but at Mom and Dad's house. He'd spun them some sob story about me turning my back on family, and of course they ate it up. Mom called me with her concerned voice, the one that's halfway between guilt trip and manipulation. "Mark, maybe you should apologize," she said. "Jake is struggling. He's embarrassed. You know how much his career meant to him." Embarrassed. That word stuck in my chest like a shard of glass. Because Jake wasn't embarrassed when he laughed at me in front of cousins. He wasn't embarrassed when he told the whole bar I'd never survive without him. Embarrassment was for me, always me. That night, I made a decision. If Jake wanted to drag me through the mud with family, then I was going to return the favor. But not with words, with proof. See, Jake had a pattern. He was always bragging on Facebook and Instagram, posting like he was still a big shot even though he'd been unemployed for months. Fancy meals he couldn't afford, gym selfies and clothes he didn't buy, Throwback Thursday posts about deals he'd closed years ago. He was clinging to this image of himself as untouchable. And here's where the sweet part came in. I had his duffel bag, the one he'd stormed out with. He left half of it behind. Inside were overdue bills, rejection emails, even a repossession notice for his car. The cherry on top? A half-written rant he'd typed into his notes app about how everyone, including me, our parents, and his old boss, had conspired to ruin him. So I did something Jake never expected. I invited the family over. Just a casual Sunday dinner at my place, I said. Nothing fancy? I cleaned the apartment, lit candles, set the table, and when everyone was seated, I waited for Jake to start. It didn't take long. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, beer in hand, and said, "I'm just glad to be with people who actually care about family. Unlike some." His eyes cut straight to me. That's when I pulled out the folder. I had printed everything: his eviction notice, his past due bills, the repossession letter, and I dropped them on the table. "Funny," I said, "because the guy who says I can't survive is living off lies. You want to tell mom and dad about the job interviews you bombed? Or the car you don't actually own anymore?" The room went dead silent. Jake's face drained of color, then flushed bright red. He reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. "No, no. You made a point to humiliate me in front of family. Let's return the favor. Everyone should know who the tough one really is." Mom gasped. Dad looked like he was about to say something, then didn't. And Jake exploded. He shoved his chair back so hard it toppled, knocking into the wall. He was screaming, half words, half raw animal noise. And before I could react, he snatched the stack of papers from my hand, crumpling them into his fists. "You think this makes you better than me?" he roared, spittle flying. "You're nothing, Mark. Nothing." Then he grabbed my lamp off the table and hurled it against the wall. Glass shattered across the floor. My niece, who Mom had brought along, burst into tears. It was chaos. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I didn't back down. I stood there, heart steady, and said the one line he had drilled into me since childhood. "Toughen up, Jake." After that dinner, the whole family dynamic detonated. Jake stormed out of my apartment like a hurricane, leaving behind shattered glass, spilled beer, and a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. Mom rushed after him, pleading. Dad just sat there stiff, staring at the bills like they were written in another language. Nobody said a word to me. They all left quietly, like I'd committed the crime. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. That Jake would crawl off, lick his wounds, and finally realize the gig was up. I underestimated him. The next morning, I woke up to 30 notifications. Jake had gone nuclear on Facebook. A full-blown post tagging me, Mom, Dad, even cousins. He painted himself as the tragic hero, betrayed by his jealous little brother, mocked when all he needed was compassion. He claimed I stole his private papers to humiliate him. And the worst part? He said I'd hit him. Flat out lied. Comments flooded in. Some relatives piled on with sympathy. "Stay strong, Jake." Everyone stumbles. Others messaged me privately asking if I'd really attacked him. Even people from high school chimed in, old teammates egging him on. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts, DMs, calls. Half of them were pitying me, the other half were accusing me. Then came the escalation. That same night, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open slowly and froze. My living room was wrecked. Couch cushions slashed, kitchen drawers pulled out, my framed graduation photo smashed to dust. But it wasn't a robbery. Nothing valuable was taken. My laptop was still there, my wallet untouched. This was personal. And on the wall, scrawled in black marker, was one word: soft. I knew it was Jake. Nobody else would write that. I called the police. They came, took a report, snapped some photos. The officer asked if I had enemies. I almost laughed. Just one. When I said it was my brother, the cop gave me this look like he'd seen it all before. "Family disputes," he muttered, shaking his head. Of course, when Mom found out, she called in a fury. Not at Jake, at me. "How could you drag the police into this? He's your brother, Mark. Do you want him arrested? Do you want to ruin his life?" That was the moment something in me hardened. I realized I wasn't just dealing with Jake. I was fighting an entire narrative, one my family had built for decades. Jake, the golden boy. Mark, the fragile disappointment. And now Jake was spiraling so hard he'd rather burn down my life than admit his own failure. I looked around my ruined apartment, glass crunching under my shoes, marker bleeding into the wall paint, and I made a promise. If Jake wanted war, I'd give it to him. Not fists, not screaming matches. No, something cleaner, sharper. The kind of revenge that would strip away the one thing he clung to, his pride. He wanted everyone to believe I was weak. Fine, I'd let them see what Jake really was. Update 2. All right, here's the second update, the way a Reddit follow-up post would feel after the vandalism. So, yeah, things got a hell of a lot worse since my last post. First, thank you again to everyone who's been following this chaos. Some of your DMs literally kept me sane. Special shout out to the guy who said, "Your brother's not spiraling, he's orbiting the drain." That one made me laugh out loud while I was sweeping glass off my floor. Here's what went down. Jake broke into my apartment. Didn't steal a thing, just trashed it and left soft, written in marker on the wall like some deranged graffiti artist. I called the cops. They filed a report, took photos, but you could tell they weren't thrilled about getting in the middle of family drama. Meanwhile, Jake went full PR campaign online. He posted this long sob story about how I betrayed him, how I'd always been jealous, and even claimed I hid him in front of the family. Total fabrication. Of course, some people bought it. Mom's still stuck in her loop of, "He doesn't mean it, Mark. He's just going through a hard time." I swear, if Jake robbed a bank, she'd blame the teller for provoking him. But here's the thing. The vandalism flipped a switch in me. Up until then, I was reacting, dodging his tantrums, cleaning up his messes, defending myself to family. Now? No. I'm done playing defense. I've been collecting things, screenshots of his Facebook lies, copies of the eviction and repossession notices he left behind. Even a video, get this, my neighbor across the hall caught him on her Ring camera the night of the break-in. You can see Jake dragging my trash can down the hall, ranting to himself, then kicking my door. It's all there, time-stamped, crystal clear. And the best part? Jake doesn't know I have it. Some of you told me to cut contact completely, others said to blast him publicly. I think I'm going to do both, in a way that makes sure nobody ever looks at him the same again. Because for years, his power was in controlling the story, making me look weak while he played the golden boy. But this time, I get to hold the microphone. Soft, huh? We'll see how tough he looks when everyone sees who he really is. I knew I couldn't just blast Jake online the way he had done to me. That would turn into a he said circus, and my parents would dismiss it as sibling drama. If I was going to do this, it had to be undeniable. Something that hit his pride so hard he couldn't spin it. So I waited. And the chance came quicker than I expected. Mom organized a family dinner at her house the following weekend. She claimed it was about healing tensions, but I knew what it really was. Her trying to sweep Jake's behavior under the rug. She even guilt-tripped me over the phone. "Mark, if you don't come, everyone will think you're holding a grudge." Fine, I'd go. But not to play nice. I showed up with a folder under my arm and my neighbor's Ring video queued up on my phone. The living room was full. Mom, Dad, a couple cousins, and of course Jake, holding a beer like he owned the place. He smirked when he saw me, like he'd already won. Dinner started tense but quiet. Jake tried to act casual, cracking jokes, even poking at me. "Hey Mark, you fixed that wall yet? Bet it was tough, huh?" Everyone chuckled nervously. My hands itched. I waited until dessert. Mom brought out a cake, trying to make it all sweet family vibes. That's when I stood up. "I think we should clear something up," I said, pulling the folder from my bag. Jake's smirk faltered. I laid out the overdue bills, the repossession notice, the printed Facebook posts where he bragged about cars he didn't own and jobs he didn't have. The room went silent. Then I pulled out my phone and hit play. On the TV, thanks to screen mirroring, Jake's face appeared, red, twisted, screaming as he pounded on my door. The video showed him dragging the trash can down the hall, kicking my door, vandalizing the hallway. The audio was crystal clear. "Mark, you'll never survive without me." My mom gasped. My dad muttered something under his breath. My cousins looked away, embarrassed. And Jake? His face drained of color, then turned purple with rage. "You set me up," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "This is fake. He edited this." He lunged toward the TV like he could rip the video out of existence. I didn't move. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Toughen up, Jake. Everyone sees you now." He lost it. Full meltdown. He threw his beer bottle against the wall, screamed at Mom for taking my side, then stormed out the door so violently the frame shook. The silence afterward was suffocating. Finally, Mom whispered, I didn't know." Dad just rubbed his face with both hands like he wanted to disappear. I gathered my papers, tucked my phone back in my pocket, and left without another word. For the first time in years, I walked out of a family dinner standing taller than Jake. But I also knew something. People like him don't just vanish. He'd be back, angrier than ever. And this time, I wasn't afraid. Jake didn't take the humiliation quietly. I knew he wouldn't. For a couple of days after the family dinner, I didn't hear from him. No texts, no pounding at my door, no Facebook rants. Just silence. It was the kind of calm that makes your skin crawl, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then it hit. I came home late one night to find my car keyed from headlight to taillight. A long, jagged scar carved into the paint, and on the windshield, scrawled in black marker again, was the word he loved to brand me with. Soft. I stood in the parking lot under the buzzing streetlight, staring at the damage, and for the first time I didn't feel scared or humiliated. I felt done. Done with the cycle. Done with letting him define me. The next morning, I filed a restraining order. I handed the police the ring footage, the vandalism photos, the voicemails he'd left, alternating between sobbing and threats. The officer nodded, said, "This is more than enough." That same day, I posted the video online myself. Not in a rage, not out of spite. Just the truth. I uploaded the hallway footage with the caption, "For everyone who thinks I'm too soft to survive, here's what I've been dealing with." I didn't tag Jake. I didn't have to. People knew. The video spread fast. Family, mutual friends, even some of his old co-workers saw it. The comments shredded him. By the weekend, Jake called me from a blocked number. His voice was hoarse, broken. "You ruined me," he said. "Everyone thinks I'm a psycho now." And I said the line I'd waited years to say, calm and steady, "Toughen up." Then I hung up. I haven't heard from him since. Mom still tries to guilt me, calls about forgiveness and family bonds. But I don't bend anymore. Dad, surprisingly, has started checking in on me quietly, like he's finally seeing me outside of Jake's shadow. It's awkward, but it feels real. My car's still scratched. My living room still has that faint marker stain on the wall where I scrubbed for hours. The scars are there, physical and otherwise. But every time I see them, I don't think of myself as weak anymore. I think of survival. Because soft doesn't mean weak. And tough doesn't mean breaking everyone around you. Jake thought he was the storm. Turns out, I was the one who learned how to weather it. And when the wind died down, I was still standing.